Well, I remember when I was a child, people used to talk about where they were when President John F. Kennedy was assassinated, and elderly people used to even talk about where they were when Pearl Harbor happened. My dad remembered Pearl Harbor. He remembered it from the point of view of a small child, because he was a small child at the time, but he was born. And he was old enough to be aware of what had happened. So, of course, I wasn't born for either of those things or the president being assassinated either, but I do remember where I was 10 years ago today. On September 11th, I worked different shifts throughout my adult life, but I was working a day shift that particular day, and word came out that a plane had hit one of the Twin Towers. I'm like, well, my first reaction, it really didn't occur to me that it was an act of terror. My first reaction was, well, that's got to be kind of stupid. The building wasn't moving. How do you... I guess something could go wrong with the plane, but it just seemed... I was thinking more along those lines. Then about an hour or so later, a second plane hit the second building, at the other Twin Tower. And then it's like, well, obviously that's no accident. It's obviously terrorist attacks. So, we all remember where we were when that tragic thing happened. The most horrendous day in American history, I would have to say. Pearl Harbor was a bad thing too, of course. It was a unexpected attack, but at least, although it was a cowardly act of terror, at least they attacked a military base, a naval base in Pearl Harbor. They didn't attack civilians, tourists, business people. And of course, the next plane was headed for the Pentagon. 2 hit the tower, 1 hit the Pentagon. And the other one, once some other passengers knew that the plane had been hijacked, they were able to cause it to crash in a Pennsylvania field, not too far from here actually, about halfway between here and Pittsburgh. And that one was allegedly headed for the Capitol. And while a lot of people don't share my opinion about President Bush and his leadership, I thought in our country's darkest hour, perhaps ever, and we really needed leadership, I believe we got it. And I will always believe that. A decade later, do we feel any safer? Well, I think I do. I think it woke us up. I think it brought some attention to our country overall, how vulnerable we all can be, and how we really better live our life, because you just never know when it can be ended. You could be out visiting towers, and next thing you know, you could be out visiting a tourist attraction like the Twin Towers, and next thing you know, that can happen. I hope and I believe that our borders are a little bit safer than they were. I don't know how you prevent a plane from being hijacked, but airport security is definitely more difficult than it used to be. I suppose where there's a will, there's a way, but airport security has improved a great deal, and I don't think it was ever bad. It took a pretty good plan to make that happen. So what has happened since then, the War on Terror? The War on Terror, Saddam Hussein, who was not involved in 9/11, he was, however, a known terrorist who refused to conform with the terms of the surrender of the first war that involved him. So he's been removed from power and executed. Osama bin Laden has been found and executed. Now, that's not to say that there still isn't terror. That's not to say that there still aren't extremists who will try to destroy our way of life, and that's true of the Western world overall. But I think that I feel safer now than I did the day after 9/11 a decade ago. I don't know if my feeling that way is really properly founded, but I do feel that way. But I, for one, was never one to just live in fear that this could be your last day on Earth. I mean, of course it could be. But, I mean, every time you get in your vehicle, you have to recognize your own mortality. I don't really care to live in that fear, but a decade later, I want to take a moment and salute all our soldiers and remember the families and the victims of some 3,000 people who were killed on that day between the Twin Towers, the Pentagon, the firefighters who were in the rescue mission when they were also killed, and some other volunteers and some other clergy who were involved in the help effort who were killed. So it's good to take a moment and remember them on this 10th anniversary.